If you dug up a time capsule of Christian radio in the 90s, I'm willing to bet one of Stephen Curtis Chapman's Dove Awards that you'd hear at least one For Him song, or maybe two or three. That's because Mark Harris, Kirk Sullivan, Marty McGahey, and today's guest, Andy Chrisman, cranked out a steady stream of anthems that personified Christian music and inspire future generations to come. Get ready for the Andy Chrisman interview, which starts in 5, 4. You are watching the CCM LegacyCAST. My name is Chris Gaines. I'm here with my partner in crime, Scott Gaulden. Scott, how are you doing, my friend?
Great. Chris, how are you today?
Doing fantastic. Today's guest, Andy Chrisman. It's going to be awesome. Let me ask you this. What is your favorite For Him song and why?
Well, I've got two, if that's all right. One is Where There Is Faith. And I love the lyrics. I love the music. And then I like Through His Eyes, just because the idea of us being able to see the world through Jesus' eyes, I think is a great idea. That's something I pray for on a regular basis, that I be allowed to see things through His eyes so that I can be aware of seeing the world in a way that He saw it. I think it's a great concept.
You're going deep really quick. I was just going to keep it light and funny, but it's okay.
I can be light and funny if you need me to be.
All right, with that, let's just bring Andy to the stage. Andy Chrisman, Thank you so much for joining us, man. It is a pleasure to have you here. What is up, my brother?
Hey, you picked two good songs there because I sing both of those songs. Which is,
I believe the agreed upon price was $50.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll expect to see it in the mail in a few weeks, okay?
Yeah. Awesome. And then I was also watching the intro you did there. I didn't see any For Him, so that's...
Scott put that together, so I'll have to...
I'm sorry.
My interns there. I'm sorry about that. We
Scott, whatever...
We'll fix that.
Yeah, whatever you just gained...
Well,
it's gone.
So much for being
evened out.
We're
back to the bottom here.
The intro.
Okay.
Listen, we got so much to cover. We're going to really pack a lot in a small period of time. Before we dive into our normal, let's talk about you and you're a baby and look at funny pictures. I want to talk about Andy Chrisman, the podcaster. How about that?
Oh, wow.
When did all this happen? Dude, real quick, if you guys have not checked out his podcast, I highly, highly recommend it. He's been doing this a lot longer than we have. 1 Degree of Andy, is that right?
That's right.
That's pretty sweet.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about how that started and what you're doing over there, man.
So it really starts about 17, 18 years ago. I was asked by a local radio station here in Tulsa to help create a Sunday morning worship show. And I was like, I've been a guest on radio shows before, but I've never hosted one. So they really helped me out, gave me a producer, gave me some studio time, and really set me up to win. And so I started doing that. And it became the number one show on radio in Tulsa over the weekends, which it wasn't like Sean Hannity or anything like that, but it was, the numbers were really, really good. And then all of a sudden they switched formats. Their parent company switched formats, went to talk radio. And so I walked the show over to KXOJ, which was been here for 30, 40 years now. And then we started getting syndicated. So we went from just doing it here in Tulsa to now over 500 stations. It's called Worship with Andy Chrisman. It's on 500 stations around the world, at least at last count. It continues to grow every month. And I just sit down with worship leaders and artists and people that I've come into contact through my life and share their stories. And we play worship music in between. Anyway, say all that to say, I started to develop a kind of another show to go along with it called Hit Rewind. And because I started having guys like Clay Cross and Wayne Watson and Russ Taff on when they would have some worship music out, I have them on the show. And I'm like, these conversations take on a little different flavor when we start talking about the good old days of Christian music, which to me are the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But I just didn't have the bandwidth with everything else I was doing. I didn't have the bandwidth to really give my heart to it until obviously the pandemic hit. We all had a lot of time in 2020. And I started thinking about it again. And really last year was when I pulled the trigger on it. And the guy that produces my radio show, Rob Tucker, he gave me some really good ideas on what to do. And so we're 50 episodes in now, and it's really taken off. It's been so fun to And then a couple other side notes here. The Jesus Music movie came out. I just noticed there were a lot of people left out of that movie, which, look, it's just a 2-hour movie. There's no way you can put everybody in. But I just thought, man, there's so much more we could be telling about the history of Christian music. And then did you guys see the Friends reunion episode?
It was my kids stopped down for everything. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then we just lost Chandler.
Right.
Matthew Perry.
Right.
A couple years ago. And so my wife and I just rewatched that reunion special a week ago. And I was like, man, this is one of the things that I feel like motivated me to start this podcast, because we're losing people.
Right.
I mean, we're losing people rapidly from that era that I want their story. I want to be a little bit of a story. And I had Jeff Moore on a few episodes ago, and he said, he put it really well. He said, you're adding your storytelling to the history of Christian music, the golden era of Christian music. And he's like, we need more of this. I'm like, well, keep going, because the list is so long of people that want to be on, that we're going to have on. And it's just really, really, really fun. So if you're a fan of classic Christian music, then I really think this podcast is not just because of me, it's because of the stories that are told. It's just gold. It really is.
We felt the same way when we were looking around. We didn't feel like there was anything like that. And short of getting, one of the things I've wanted was reunion tours. If Journey can come through 48 times,
I don't like that.
Play the same set list every single time too.
Nobody has figured out how to do it. And I've been in some conversations, especially since the podcast has taken off, and with your podcast, and there's a couple of others that are out there. There seems to be a little bit of groundswell of our generation, or a little bit older, that wants to hear that music again. And somebody's going to figure out how to put some of these tours together and make them profitable for the artists, and actually do something that gets some momentum. And it just hasn't been any of that up to this point. And a lot of it is because there's no recurrent Christian radio,
right,
other than the K-Love 90s or 80s app. Then there's no radio station out there. Like there's classic rock, there's classic pop, there's classic country. There are outlets for the music of 40 and 50 years ago that we can find everywhere, even on the car radio. It's just not that for Christian music. So I think that's a big part of it. But we're gonna ride this wave as long as we can, because there's so many more stories to tell.
Well, you said it again. It's funny how when we talk about this, we went through a journey together. We talk about going from cassettes, 8-tracks, cassettes, to CDs, to Napster, and so isn't it funny that we're now beholding a little bit to the airplay again? We're still back in the same place, where if we could get some airplay, we could make this thing happen. But it's just such a different world, and so we just want to applaud what you're doing. And the more this, the better. We just feel like somebody said, "Well, there's a lot of overlap there." I said, "Look, we got how many Bibles do we have? We got to get the word out. We got to give a platform to these people." And so I want to see Andy's show blow up and get humongous.
Absolutely.
But some of these same guys, but I want more. I got a chance to sit down with Jeff, who's just super special to me. And I told Scott, I don't know if anybody answered the question about legacy with more thought and authenticity. I kind of want to go back and rewind it a couple of times and listen to it, but just so neat hearing those. I mean, the stories are fun, which I have a couple. At least I have one for you that Steve Geyer wanted me to give to you. We'll hold on.
Steve.
Yeah.
What a dude.
Here we go.
But I mean, wanting to know, what is it you're doing now? What is it that's important to you to leave behind? What songs has God given you? What messages have you been given? What's happened in your life? I mean, Scott Gaulden here was really good about encouraging me, because I said, this is something I've always wanted to do, but I don't know if there's a market. I don't know, and then all these excuses. And just hit record. Just do a Zoom call and sit down with Rick Kua and let Rick do Rick. And all of a sudden, at the end of an hour, you're like, wow. Yeah. I'm so glad we put that down for future generations. No pun intended. But anyway, I'm just so glad we're doing that. And so I just wish you the best. And with that, let's talk a little bit about your journey. I'm going to turn it over to Scott for a second.
Yeah, one of the things we always like to do, Andy, is just start from the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about where you were raised, what it was like growing up, a little bit about your family, kind of?
Of course, yeah. I was born in Waco, Texas. My dad was a military man, and finally finished his...
Yeah, the Bears, we got to do sick 'em Bears while we're going to say that. Yeah, okay.
Let's see how well they do in the tournament this year. But I grew up in Waco, spent my whole life there up until I graduated high school, and everybody just assumed, I kind of assumed that I would go to Baylor and follow my dad's footsteps. He's a Baylor grad. My oldest brother was a Baylor grad, but I grew up in Waco. I just had to get out. I couldn't see myself spending another 4 years there. And so, I went to Stillwater, Oklahoma, and my brother was a minister of music at a church in Stillwater, and that's where Oklahoma State is. And I was wanting to pursue engineering. I knew I could sing, but man, I don't know. There wasn't a huge contemporary Christian music scene in Waco, even though Word Records was in Waco at the time. Right. There wasn't like this vibrant scene where I was like, I could dream of being, something more than, just singing at my local church. And when I got to college, chasing an engineering degree, I just started falling into bands, and people were asking me to come sing for them. And so that gift just started to kind of bubble over and really shine through. And I remember a moment where I just surrendered to God. It was my junior year. And I'm like, God, look, I don't know where to take this. I know I'm good at it, but you just take me where you want me to go. And it was like 24 hours later, Roger Breland of Truth called my landline. And, that's all we had back then. Called my landline phone in my apartment in Stillwater and said, hey, I heard you could sing. Why don't you come audition for us? So I did. I flew to Mississippi, and I auditioned for the group. He hired me right away. And then that's where Mark Harris was already there. And then like 3 months later, Marty McGehee showed up. And then a couple months after that, Kirk Sullivan showed up. So the four of us, we sang together. We did 1,000 shows in the group Truth.
Real quick, let me jump in there real quick and let the audience know that at that time, give me the year again. That would have been late 70s?
So that would have been 1987. I joined Truth
late 80s. Okay.
Yeah, February of 87. So right at the beginning of the year.
So if you can, do a dive into Truth. Truth was a big deal.
Yeah. And
so when Andy says, hey, I'm in this thing called Truth, you need to understand you're talking about kind of an international ministry that was going into at the time. I remember them in the late 70s. They would come to gyms and churches, and we didn't have a lot. That was kind of, someone would say, hey, there's a rumor out there. There's a band called Petra out there. What's that? Yeah. So we were at a Truth concert, and so we were it was kind of this up with people on steroids kind of thing. But it was a big deal. I mean, so what, the 25th anniversary, then the 50-year reunion?
Yeah, the 50th anniversary. In fact, we're working on finishing up the album. Like a triple album is coming out sometime this year, and it's fantastic. It's just amazing, all the people that showed up. Yeah, Truth has quite the legacy. They started in 1971, and I would equate them more with like the Continental Singers or the Spurlows, Thurlow Spurs group, that you would have 8 singers on stage, 4 guys, 4 girls, full band, full horn section, lights and staging and all that stuff. And we toured across the country doing 340 some shows a year. Like there was rarely a night off. And so it was the top of the, if you didn't already have a record contract, then it's kind of, I don't want to say the minor leagues, if that would degrade what we did. We called it Christian Music Boot Camp. If you really wanted a career in this, Truth was a great place to get into. And a lot of people tried to get in. In fact, I would say the majority of people that I've had on my podcast, they all at some point tried to audition for Truth and didn't make it, just because everybody wanted to get in. If you were good and you couldn't, they weren't giving away record deals back during that time. I mean, it was a really good place to cut your teeth and find out if you're really good at this. And so some of the alumni from Truth include Steve Green, of course. For him, there was, Natalie Grant came out of Truth. Russ Lee of New Song came out of Truth. Karen Fairchild, who is one of the founding members of Little Big Town. And then like big time players all over the Christian landscape. And if you see Carrie Underwood, her bass player and band leader was in Truth.
Melody Tony. That's right. Melody Tony. I didn't know they were there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Wrote some big songs in the 80s in Christian music. Stephen V. Taylor, who was producer of the year at the Doves a few years ago, does a lot of production work. He was my very first producer in Truth. Oh yeah, Avalon basically came out of Truth. Jody McBrayer, Jana Potter, who's now Jana Long, married to Greg Long. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. There are hundreds of churches out there that have ministers of music that spent time in Truth as well. So it's a legacy group for sure. And they're in Roger and Truth are in the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. I say this all the time on my podcast. You can't tell the story of Christian music without Roger Breland and Truth. So I wouldn't be where I am today without that experience.
I appreciate you sharing that. Our audience needs to know it's a big deal, and they need to do. Absolutely. So thanks.
Let me ask you this, Andy, going back to like learning music. When you were in high school, did you know that you had a gift? When was the point where you were like, I think I got something special here? Or what was that like?
Yeah, good question. I've always sung. My brothers tell stories. And then my brothers are like 10 and 13 years older than me, but they tell stories of taking me to basketball games, and they were trying to impress girls, and they would have me sing, and the girls would pass me around, and I was their little good luck charm. And so I just always
whatever works, man. Whatever works.
It's a story I hear from just about every artist that I have on, that they knew at 3 and 4 years old that they had a gift to sing, and everybody told them they were good, and they would get opportunities. And so again, growing up in Waco, the high school that I went to, music was not a huge priority in the school. It was all sports and FFH and all that stuff. It was, or FFA rather. It wasn't looked upon as something to want to have a career in or want to actually do.
Right.
But I sang in talent shows. I sang at my church. By the time I was like 15 or 16, my little church was paying me $20 a weekend to lead the hymn service. So I learned how to read music out of the hymn book. And I learned all those great songs. And deacons and pastors would come up to me after I would sing, and they would say, get this young man's autograph right now because he's going to be famous one day. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. But again, it's those things you start filing away, just going, I think I am good at this. I think I do have an exceptional gift that might be worth chasing as a career at some point. But again, you never quite know until the opportunities happen, until somebody reaches out and says, hey, we think you're good enough to come do this.
But it sounds like you didn't have any like formal training or anything like that it was just kind of, you were self-taught and wow, just a gift from God that you were able to develop and do something with. That's amazing.
I took 12 years of classical piano, and that really helped me with my theory and ear training. So by the time I got to truth, one of the things you kind of had to do was you had to learn how to read music, or you had to know how to read music,
right?
Because they throw you in the studio, give you a chart, and you got to go. I mean, we got to get these things knocked out. So that really helped me later in my journey having musical training. But I've been around a lot of really great musicians who can't read music and never had a lesson in their life. So a lot of it's just innate, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. What were you listening to when you were growing up? What kind of music was popular to you?
So
your influences?
I was a pop radio guy, and Kenny Loggins is my number one artist. And so I've gotten to meet him 2 or 3 times. It's just been a thrill to be able to talk to him and tell him what an influence he's been in my life. And Kenny Loggins was it for me. I really wanted to start sounding like him. But then my high school years, you got to think about Genesis and Journey and Mr. When I got to college, I wanted to, I wanted to be Richard Page so bad. That he's on my Mount Rushmore of vocalists. And so I have a lot of vocal students that I coach, and I tell them, I kind of guessed right early on. I picked voices that were sustainable and came from a deep place and were very emotional. And those are some of the artists. But again, everything on pop radio. I'm an 80s guy. I'll fight you to convince you that 1977 to 1986 is like the era in pop and rock music.
I got your back. I got your back. We are right there. Okay.
Right answer.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Absolutely.
All right, you kids.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You kids and your music these days, you don't know what good music is.
So let me ask you, I'm going to go into a completely different direction. So there had to be something special about pop music during that time and the way that it was developing. And there had to be something special about contemporary Christian music. It was developing at the time, because if you think about it, there's this time period where they kind of come real close to each other, and they're doing this. And then all of a sudden it goes in 2 different directions. It seems like, would you agree with that?
And I know I've got an answer for you.
Okay. You know my question, please.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And he's a very dear friend of mine. I've had him on the podcast, but Michael Lamardian, I think, was the firebrand that came into Christian music when he took the Imperials and made One More Song for You and Priority. Those were game changers in Christian music. The record labels realized if we spend a little more money, we get a guy like Omar. And now these albums sound like pop albums. I mean, he was making Christopher Cross and that Sailing album at the same time. He was doing Donna Summer, She Works Hard for the Money at the same time. He was working with Steely Dan at the same time. And to bring that talent level and that ingenuity in recording into the Christian music world was like, oh, these actually kind of sound really close now. And the only thing that's different is the lyrics and the spirit behind it. And that was, I talk about this all the time. I mean, we spent a lot of money back in the day, a lot of money on our records because Omar was producing. Peter Wolf, who used to produce for Starship and Heart and Go West and all these big time pop influences for us. We were paying him gobs of money. And of course, Don Cook and Brent Bourgeois and Mark Heimerman and all these guys that would come along, they were expensive. But the reason they could charge what they charged was because it sounded like pop music. It sounded like what was current in pop radio at the time.
It's funny you say that because as we've done some artist interviews, we found out that some of the people they were playing with in studio were the same people that were doing studio work for Steely Dan and for Toto. And I mean, these are top level musicians.
Yeah.
And do you think that part of the problem is the quality of the studio musicians started to drop off after a time or something like that?
So I think we can all point to the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, when, of course, 9/11 changed everything. There was it just created this huge ripple in the touring world and just the national mindset.
Right.
And then streaming at the same time, Napster and all the streaming platforms started to come around. I remember I had the very first iPod and just remember thinking, I don't have to buy albums anymore. I can just buy singles. And I don't believe the Christian music industry was prepared for it. They were slow getting on the bandwagon for that kind of stuff, dragged their feet, kind of held their ground. We're going to continue to sell units. They didn't have another way to make money. And that's when it started to separate and has never really gotten its footing back again. I mean, there's been the Lauren Daigles and for King and Countries, but for the most part, the divide started and labels weren't making the money they were used to making back in the 90s. And so you just follow the trail and go, well, then you couldn't spend as much on an album because the returns weren't as much. So the really great players and the great producers are now going to go where the money's going because the secular labels have figured out how to make money through streaming and licensing and all that kind of stuff. And I just don't know that it's ever going to come back the way it was. And that's why I feel like that era is a golden era. I mean, we're never going to see it again.
Yeah. How tragic. Well, and it's almost like what would have happened if somebody would have said, let's put together a Christian streaming platform and just focused on contemporary Christian artists and maybe be able to extend that out.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's a good question.
And radio was changing at the time too. So not to mention there was always the bastion. We can always hit the road. Well, that changed too. Who wanted to tour after 9/11? And
that's right.
Right. It was a harmonic convergence and then this bizarre perfect storm.
And you got to add worship in, which is not a bad thing. Everything began to turn. And that's why I think 9/11 really perpetuated the modern worship movement, which I was a part of. And it pulled resources away from CCM and CCM radio to where now I knew a lot of stations and a lot of radio station managers and program directors that had changed from going, we're going to play the songs that we feel like are really great songs and are going to be hits, to now we're going to put together our focus group. And we all know who, without saying who they were in that demographic. And they want the same songs over and over and over and over again. And there'd be these massive radio stations across the country that used to be very diverse in what they played. And now what they're playing in their recurrent format is down from maybe 150 songs down to 40 songs. And so you're hearing the same songs over and over and over again, 5, 6, 7 years later. And again, I just think it started chipping away at the risk-taking in Christian music. What can we do next? Where can we take it now to, hey, if we're going to get any rare play, we're going to make any money, we got to fit in this really tiny lane and make sure that this audience gets fed. And that's kind of where we are today, in my opinion.
Going back, Andy, what was maybe one or two of the most memorable moments you can look back on and say, this was really memorable to me? Maybe it was something that was very emotional to you, or life changing. What would be an important moment over the
Wow,
last couple?
if we're going to talk about my Christian music career, there are a lot of, I see a lot of swirling thoughts and memories out here. I'm just going to start grabbing a few. One would be bringing my 5-year-old son out on the road on tour with me, and we were in we were in Bangor, Maine, and the night before we went out a little early and did some sightseeing and stuff. And the night before our show, he accepted Christ. He asked me if he could ask Jesus into his heart, and so I led my son to Christ the night before the concert, and then I brought him up on stage that next night, and he got to profess his profession of faith in front of that sold out crowd, and the place just went nuts. And that's kind of like, wow, I got to, that was really cool for me as a dad. And then really great memory. And my son even remembers it now, and he's in his early 30s, and he remembers being on that stage at 5 years old, telling everybody that he accepted Christ into his heart. So those are unique experiences. I think being able to sing at Billy Graham crusades, those are always just incredible times. Just some of the people I got to meet over the years, George Beverly Shea, Bill Gaither, goodness. I remember Pat Boone, just spending time with Pat Boone over the years has been just a memorable experience. You kind of get to peek behind the veil a little bit. And I think those are some of my greatest memories. Working with Michael Omartian, again, because I was such a fan of his music back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, to get to work with him and call him a friend and just watch just what a master he was in the studio. I don't know. It'd be hard for me to pin down, like, this is why I do what I do. I could tell you some times where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Those were, sometimes those stick out a little more than the good stuff. But yeah, there's so many. Guys, I did 5,000 concerts.
Wow.
I tried to add it up at one point, but between 1987 and 2006, when we stopped touring, I was a part of about 5,000 shows during that stretch. Yeah.
Let me ask you more on a personal side. Who would you describe as maybe one or two of your faith heroes? Maybe even outside of music, just people that have had an outsized impact on how you view faith.
I mean, I've got to go back to Roger Breland. He was my very first mentor. Just because, I mean, I'm this little Southern Baptist kid jumping on a bus with a bunch of Pentecostals, and he was a Baptist boy as well. And it was like, I got a lot to learn here, and this is kind of freaking me out. But the faith that I saw in Roger really still impacts me today. So a lot of the things that he said, either on stage or backstage, just about life and how we can trust God. And he was always, if you knew anything about truth, they were always in a faith situation, because taking 20 some people out on the road under the age of 30 on a bus, doing night after night after night, took a lot of faith, took a lot of guts to do it, and a lot of dependence on God. So I would say he was probably my first real faith hero. And then, man, Willie George. I came to work for Willie George here at Church on the Move. If you don't know who he is, he's Gospel Bill. If anybody remembers the Gospel Bill shows, he's Gospel Bill. And he hired me to come to Tulsa, and where I've been since 2005. And just sitting under him and learning, and just the way he tears the word apart and breaks it down for you to understand, and just blows your mind every time you hear him speak. He's a big, big faith hero of mine. And then there have just been some really close friends who kind of go unnamed, that I've watched them walk through some real struggles, and they'll never get the glory of being on stage or being a radio interview or on a podcast, where they've gone through extreme situations and never let go of their faith. And I'm like, that's the faith I want, because I know it's going to happen to all of us. So the Bible say that the righteous will have many trials, but the Lord will rescue them from each one of them. So we're all going to go through trials, and I'm grateful for the men and women that God have put in my life over the decades to show me what real faith is, because I'm going to need that at some point as well.
Yeah. I always like somebody said recently, nobody's faith ever got stronger because they won the lottery, right?
That's exactly right.
Your faith grows when you go through difficult times. And I don't know any other way that it grows except to go through the difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
the
right.
only
We
way
don't
it
want
does.
to, and we don't want to ask God for him, but
No.
man, doggone it, he always shows up during those times.
Absolutely.
Scott, if you don't mind, I want to shift gears just a little bit. We've got to
Sure.
talk about the golden years of Christian music. I want to talk about the golden years of For Him. I'll go ahead and start by the Steve Geyer story. Tell me if you recall this. According to Geyer kept falling into things. He'd be somewhere and Dan Brock would go, "Hey, you want to tour with these guys?" And he's so engaging. Gosh, the guy's so amazing. And you guys are always looking for good openers. Lord knows who we put on stage in front of you guys. I hope you'll forgive me for some of the opening acts we gave you guys. But the story goes something like this. I guess the guys hadn't gotten to you to tell you who. All you knew was a comedian was going to be opening. Y'all were backstage cutting up, and Geyer's in the middle of it. Didn't tell you who he was, and you guys he gets to be the secret shopper, and you guys are like, I don't know if you're really slamming him, but you're like, I hope this guy's funny. These guys are just so cornball. And of course, Geyer's got chops from nightclubs, and he said he just let you guys go and go and go until his manager walked in and goes, "Oh, great guys, you got to meet Steve Geyer. These are the guys before him." And y'all were all kind of like cowering in the corner, like, what did we say? He said he busted you guys' chops for years over that. So don't know if that's a true story or not.
It is true, and Steve's one of my favorite people in the world. I'm so glad he's still doing what he's doing. And again, people that you just look at him, you start laughing.
Oh,
and that's the way with Geyer is. I see his name and I start laughing. I mean, he's absolutely one of the guys, one of the greats.
Show,
yeah,
Scott, that was one of Scott's greatest moments. He had Geyer in tears laughing and then tears crying because he just opened him up. Scott's got some issues he's been through with his dad, and Steve is well known for some of the struggles he's gone through in his faith. But
can we just comment on what's on the screen right now?
Please do. That's what I was hoping.
Yeah, that's little baby Andy up there. You just saw my wife. They did a close up of her.
Oh, it was in the crowd?
Yeah, that was my wife, the blonde. We'd been married maybe for a year at that point. And
I don't know if I'm going to get
hair.
Have you been able to get away with playing any of this music without either Benson, somebody, or YouTube coming after you? I want to be able to play some more of this music.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't do music on my podcast because of that, because of all the, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how people do it and get away with it, but probably just haven't gotten caught yet. But
I've been told
the algorithms.
If we critique it, we're okay. So let's start making more fun of it, and we're good. But
okay, there you go. Yeah. make all the fun you want. There's a lot to make fun of in this clip right here.
There's a lot of fabric up on that stage. Is what I'm noticing. There's a lot of fabric. So
I purposely kept several of those outfits just to remind myself of my bad taste in clothing back from those days.
Come on, guys! Don't be so hard on yourself. This was
and
good.
I'm mortified and jealous at the same time of that hair.
Yes, exactly. You should
because I could have done so much more with it, but I wish I had it now. There's no way I can get that anymore.
There you go. Absolutely
incredible. That was filmed in 1991. So I believe that's on. There's a video that came out as a live video, and I think it was right around the time that the Face the Nation album came out, which would have been like 1991. And I think that video had like A Man You'd Write About, which was a real music video.
Yeah.
Maybe He Never Changes. I think we did a video for that one. And maybe When It's Time to Go, maybe was on that one. I don't remember. Sometimes I get the albums mixed up, but we did a lot of ZTV short form videos. Oh yeah, there's Basics of Life. That was shot here in Tulsa.
Was it really?
Yeah, and that's Kirk's mom behind him. Yep.
See, that's half the fun. To me, I want to go back and roll all these and just talk about all the stuff behind it. Oh, look at there.
Look pensive.
So you got the
stand by the light pole and look pensive. That's the best I could do.
Tell me you were cracking up when they were trying to film these. You had to be.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, they go by so fast, and everything's on a shoestring budget. Stephen Yake did this one for us, and just the master of videos back then. But everything goes by fast, and you're just trying to get the shot, and like, let's go, move to the next place, do the next place, do the next place.
Does somebody have like a jam box, and they're just like hit play and then act like you're singing along with it? So it's not that fancy.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it goes. And you have to sing out loud. I always used to think that artists were just lip syncing, like where they were just moving their mouths. They're like, yeah, it doesn't look real. You have to sing along. You have to sing out. So you're literally standing on the side of the road, singing out loud this part, and people are, I remember that shirt. Oh, man. I haven't seen this video in a while, but I remember all those clothes.
Good stuff. Yeah. So the random artist walking down the street in Nashville doing his music video, everybody just like, oh, no big deal. That's another music video. He's just lip syncing. Yeah, gotcha.
Yep. But they're singing loud. Yeah, you have to. That's part of it.
What a great bunch of guys. Tell me just a little bit about, I'm always fascinated by families that do this for any long period of time, or ensembles and groups like that. I mean, you guys have to become brothers. You live together, you travel together, you do everything together. Is much like athletes. Is that one of the things you miss the most? Is those?
Yes and no. I mean, I do love those guys. I really do. And we were more like, we laugh and say, we're not brothers. We're like old married folk. With the fights we would have and the disagreements we would have, we always come back, and it's sweet. We just did a show together in Branson just not long ago, and it was really good. It's like putting on your favorite pair of shoes.
Right.
It just fits so well, and the songs and the way we interacted with each other, it all comes back. But we were, again, like I said, we were on that Truth Bus for 3.5 years before we ever did anything as For Him. So we kind of had it figured out. We kind of had our routine. We had our relationships figured out. We had our sound figured out. So there wasn't a lot of that trying to work it out after we got signed. And that really, really helped us. And we all had a common goal. Our common goal was to win people to Christ through our music. And that came from the Truth. Again, that's what we did every night in a Truth concert, was we gave an altar call, and we did that every night. Even if it was a bass rodeo or a standing on stage after a baseball game, we were gonna share Christ and give people an opportunity to make a decision. But these guys, they're all my friends. Mark and I are probably the closest, just because we married best friends. My wife Jackie, his wife Jody, have been best friends since 6th grade. And so they came as a package deal. When Mark started dating Jody, they introduced me to Jackie. And actually, they told Jackie they wanted to set her up with Marty. And when she came to a concert to check Marty out to see if she actually wanted to go on a date with him, she was like, "Who's that short guy right there with the big voice?" I kind of like him. So that's the way it worked out. Yeah. And so, awesome. So Mark and I stay pretty close. We talk all the time. Kirk's still in Mobile, and he's kind of like our big brother, our goofy big brother, just always good for a laugh. If Kirk calls, we're on the phone for 2 hours. And then Marty is doing his thing up in the Denver, Colorado area. He's an educator. Just, man, really found his sweet spot up there. But when we get together, we're never together long enough. And we're like old married folk. It's fun to be with each other.
I can echo that from my perspective, both as I was a young married, I had little kids. When that Basics of Life came out, and really your first one, when everything hit, it hit hard. And Benson really took you guys. Y'all were their bell cow, if I recall. And you guys were the darling guys, and you were just killing it on Christian radio. And I had an opportunity to see you guys in different settings. I've seen you in massive arenas, and then our little place. And you were always a class act. You always treated every venue like it was, the big room, the big stage. And just what you were on stage matched what you were. I can attest to that. And the different hats I had to wear through the years, I would say you guys, I have great memories of dealing with you guys.
Thank you.
And you were
that means a lot.
Acts. Well, it
really does. That means a lot.
Smoke. It was just special, and it was fun because you look like you really enjoyed it. You could tell different artists were different. Some of them were kind of folksy. Some of them were kind of making up as they go along. You guys definitely had your chops, but I think you enjoyed it, and you didn't. There was a vibe that you didn't take yourself too seriously. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just because you had a lot of dynamics going on.
I got to go back to the Truth days, and you pretty much sang for your life every night. And it was, you weren't guaranteed a spot in that group for a long period of time. It wasn't like you were signed. You didn't sign anything. You just made a handshake agreement with Roger Breland, and he's like, I'll pay you X number of dollars a week. And then we'll every few months, we'll talk about your future and how much, if this is the right fit for you. So yeah, we learned everything we knew from those previous years. And I just we felt like every opportunity was a gift. Every album we got to do was another gift, that it was just a blessing from the Lord. We got to do it again, and we got to do it again. And we got to do it again. So I don't know. I mean, I think we kept each other accountable as well. We didn't let each other get the big head, or, let our egos get too massive. I think we kept each other in check pretty well. And again, I think that our focus was more than wowing people with what we could do. And it was more about sharing the gospel through these songs and through our testimonies. And I think that was a big difference for us.
Gotcha. Let me ask one more question about the For Him, and then we'll change gears and talk a little bit about what you're doing now and really the legacy that you'd like to leave behind. And that is, I'm going to ask a non-fair question, and that is, could you tell me what your all-time favorite For Him song is and why?
Oh, wow.
And then maybe one more song that you don't think the average person knows about For Him that you're like, you know what? This is the one you're not paying attention to. This is the one that moves me every time I sing it. I wish I could sing it more. I mean, y'all's discography is so huge. It's like, well, we got to sing this. We got to sing this. We got to sing this.
Well, I mean, you kind of brought it up, at the very beginning, where there's faith. We didn't want to do the song. We didn't like it.
Really?
Our A&I guy pushed it on us. He said, I'm laying down the trump card. You're doing this song. I think it's a big hit. Amy Grant had already passed on it. Somebody else, I think maybe Wayne Watson, had passed on it. And it was just kind of sitting there and nobody had picked it up. And he believed in it. And he said, you're doing this song. So we kind of reluctantly did it. It was the last song we recorded for the album, literally because we ran through it in about half a day because we had to get back out on the road with Truth. And it became this sensation of a song.
Did you feel like it just wasn't your style or direction, or just didn't hit you guys?
It didn't sound like anything else in Christian music, and we were afraid of that. And plus, what we were doing in Truth, I mean, it was very choral and very high praise type of stuff, very high vocals kind of stuff. And this just felt very European. It felt very, I don't know, it just didn't feel like anything we heard on the radio. So we were a little scared of it. Yeah. And thankfully, we had people that were smarter than us and had more intuition than us, that we listened to them a lot more as we went along, because we're not, that's what they do for a living.
Any more songs you'd like us to record?
Yeah. But Where There's Faith is one of those songs that, now that I'm in my late 50s, it means so much more to me, to sing about a lady dressed in black in a motorcade of Cadillacs, Daddy's not coming back. And our hearts begin to fall and our stability grows weak, but Jesus meets our needs if we only believe. Man, how many people have all of us lost over the last 4 or 5 years, either due to COVID or I don't know, man. It just seems like even younger guys in my life that have been very dear friends of mine, just gone in the blink of an eye. And so when I sing these songs now, they mean so much more to me, especially Where There's Faith. Yeah. It gets me, and I get it. I'm like, maybe I recorded this song back in 1990 for this time in my life, and God was saving it for me. So I just think Where There's Faith is that one that stands out. Now, as far as a couple of songs that people might not know that I'm pretty proud of, I'll give you 3 songs, and these are all that I sing lead on. I would encourage people to go back and listen to the Walk On album. I think it is maybe at least the first 8 songs are the best stuff we've ever done. So that would have been Michael Mardian, yep, Brent Bourgeois, okay, and Mark Hireman.
The great Mark.
And just a great lineup. And they just did some great things with those songs. And I think too, we were kind of at our peak with our artistry, and you can really hear it on that record. But there's a song on there called The Waiting. When you're waiting through the hard times, hold on, don't let go. I think it's a brilliant song. And again, a song that I just kind of put on randomly now when I just need to be reminded that, man, God is still working. He's out there ahead of me, working on my behalf. I love that one. There's a song on the Obvious album, which is I feel like it's another underrated record, a song called Mystery of Grace. And that one, I just love it. I don't know why. I just love it. I love what I was able to do on it. I think my proudest moment as a vocalist, and I think it's a great song, is on the Visible album, a song called The Final Word. Love has the final word. And I think it's the best thing that we've ever done, honestly. Just, again, a Michael Mardian produced track, and what he got out is vocally where he takes that song. So those are 3, I think, hidden gems that were never singles that I believe are worth going back and listening to and rediscovering for sure. All
right. That's the challenge. Put your comments below. If you haven't already, punch like, subscribe to us, but go back and listen to those songs. Go find them. And I'd love to pass these on to Andy, your thoughts on some of these hidden gems, and maybe
Yes,
put in
please.
the comments your favorite For Him song or your favorite memory. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Scott?
Yeah. Let's take it out a little bit further, Andy.
Okay.
I think you're in your late 50s. I'm in my late 50s. We start thinking about how does this thing end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I always like to say, I think it's important for us to finish strong. I think as men of God, we're called not to be carried across the finish line, but to bust through it, going full speed. So tell me a little bit about when it's all over, what's the legacy you'd like to leave behind? What do you want to be known for when it's all said and done?
So I have a goal in life, and it is to share all the knowledge that I have with as many people as possible. Now, I'm not saying that I need a platform so people can hear my voice. I want to pour into worship leaders, into young artists. Even God's given me opportunities even now to pour into older artists who are just maybe a few years behind me, to kind of help them put some wind in their sails, to help them finish strong. That's what I want to be. I want to be, that's going to sound weird when I say it this way, but I want to be empty when I go to the throne. Yeah. I don't want to take anything with me. I want to leave it all behind. I want to invest in the next couple of generations. And I'm doing that with Mark Harris and our friend Michael Neal with a ministry called the Worship Table. We're seeing so many worship pastors across the country just kind of give up or get caught in addiction or just some really terrible things. And if they had somebody that was a little older, that's gone a little farther down the road, they would maybe draw some strength from that. And so that's what we try to do. We just gather worship pastors around the table and pour into them and let them tell their stories and help them to finish their journey well. And so maybe I could say that. Maybe that's the legacy that I want to leave. One part of the legacy I want to leave is that I want to help as many artists and worship leaders finish their race well.
Yes.
I want to finish strong. I want to finish strong.
Yes.
I want to get to the end of my life and go, I didn't leave anything on the table. I didn't leave anything undone or unsaid. Let's do everything we can. As long as I have breath, as long as I have sight, as long as I have mobility in my body, I want to proclaim who God is and his goodness and the salvation of Jesus Christ through music as much as I can. And that would be the other side of the legacy. The other side of the coin is I want to go out strong vocally. God promised me a long time ago. I've heard maybe 4 words from God in my life that were just like these audible things that just really stuck in my soul. And one of them was, I was back in 1987, maybe 88, and I'd first gotten in truth. He said, don't worry about doing anything else in life. You sing. And if you sing and put all you have into it, I'll make sure that you're always taken care of. And man, that was a weight off my shoulders. Just to go, wow, yeah. Okay, I could do that. Now, it hasn't been that easy my whole life because, now you're like, well, anybody want me to sing? Because that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. But it encourages me to keep singing. And my year just continues to be booked up. I'm singing all over the country. And I'll probably go in and do an album at some point over the next couple of years or more than that. I continue to do concerts. I'm doing more things with my voice than I've ever done before in podcasts and radio shows. And man, it's amazing how you think God's only got this. He says one thing and you think it's one thing. And God's like, oh no, I'm so much more layered than that. God's so much more than when we initially hear his voice and where he's going to take us. So yeah, I want to finish strong as a vocalist. And I feel like I'll do it to the day I die. I feel like that's the promise God's given me.
Well, I don't know a better ending to the story than that right there, Andy. I think that's
hopefully it's not ending today.
I know. Yeah, it's still a few chapters ahead. You know what I'm saying? We still got a few chapters to write, but I don't know that there's a better ending that could be written. So that's wonderful. We're just not there yet.
Oh man!
Thank God.
Yes,
Scott, you have a way with words. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just trying.
Hey, if it was, listen, I think this is one thing that we all have to come to terms with. If it was over today, what do we leave behind? Do we leave a mess behind?
I love what you said about leaving empty. We have this scarcity mentality where we hold on so tightly. And just what you said before in your mind, like, okay, I hope I can sing, I hope I can stay in this same register forever. But I never thought, okay, be doing podcasts. But God, that may be how you have in mind to use my voice, however it is. It may be a still small voice talking to my grandchild.
Right. No mind can conceive of what God has planned for those who call him Father. And so it's not that I don't dream, But I also I also open myself up to go, okay, God, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
You tell me. I'm all ears. Let's
it's
go
funny you said
into the
that.
great
We're going
unknown.
through that. Yeah, we're going through that right now at our church or in this area. It's so cool, and you've seen it through the decades when God moves and does things in different areas, and we're getting a lot of listening right now. I'm talking to a lot of people that says, he wants us to just shut up and listen. Go wherever because there's so much noise.
Yeah.
There's so much noise, and it's I'm still here. I'm still speaking, and I've got a lot to say for people that have ears to hear. And so same message, just different vehicles, different methods, different ways. So to that end, go check out Andy's website. From there, you can kind of see all the different things he's got going on. I'm sure through that, if someone wants to get a hold of you and have you involved in their church or ministry, that's probably the best place to start.
Absolutely. Yep. Or find me on social media. I'm everywhere. I'm pretty much the only Andy Chrisman out there. So that makes it easy to find me on.
That makes it easy for,
It really does. Yeah.
I'm always struggling with SEO and stuff. I mean, it started with Garth Brooks when he took my identity and did that album. it basically ruined my life.
I was playing golf with a friend of mine the other day. He's a big Garth Brooks fan, and he asked me what I was doing this week, and I was kind of showing him my calendar. He goes, "Wait, Chris Gaines, wait, what are you talking about?"
So one of my goals in this, I have a bucket list that this podcast takes me on a road, and Scott and I. It's going to lead me to Garth. We're going to have it out. I want him on the show, and I want to say, dude, what's funny is that whole album, as you well know, is put on by a lot of the guys from Whiteheart.
Yeah, Wayne Kirkpatrick.
Wayne and Gaulden and all those guys are all over that. Great album.
Yeah.
But nobody gives any credit, and so it ruined my life, and I'll get even someday. In all seriousness, check out the podcast. Man, you're doing an incredible job. If there's anything we can do to help you, man, we're praying for you, and let's
thank you so much.
Let's just continue to encourage the body. And Scott, any other last comments? Wow.
Speechless.
You're speechless. That's never happened. That's never happened.
That'll be it for me. Yeah.
Or bored out of his mind. One of the two.
Not in a million years. Man, it was a pleasure. I'd love to do it again.
Thanks,
in fact,
guys.
I'd love to help us get in touch with the other guys. We'd love to have them on anytime. Let's
Absolutely.
spread the word.
They would love it.
Blessings on you, my friend. Godspeed.
Thanks,
Andy.